Do you ever feel like this could be the end times? That true Armageddon might be just around the corner? It seems as though it's hardwired for human beings to always assume on some level that the world really will fall to ruin just at the exact moment that they happen to be alive. But actually, with this generation in the modern world, could that fear actually be more justified than it ever has been before? In this video, we're revealing multiple scientifically predicted global disasters that are coming over the horizon in the very near future, including events that specifically could happen in the years 2040, 2030, and 2025. This is Unveiled, and today we're taking a closer look at reasons why the world really could end in the next 20 years.
Do you need the big questions answered? Are you constantly curious? Then why not subscribe to Unveiled for more clips like this one, and ring the bell for more thought-provoking content.
Computer modeling is a key tool for modern-day scientists. We can now use digital projections to predict a number of things, including what the weather will be like, the effectiveness of a new medicine, how an upcoming space mission will play out, and how a city could evolve in the future. But sometimes the data that a computer reports back to us is cause for real concern. The World 1 program was commissioned by a group known as the Club of Rome and developed by MIT scientists back in 1973. It was a computer model to show the way in which certain aspects of human civilization, including population growth, energy use, and quality of life, were trending into the future. At the time, it attracted some attention because it saw mostly bad things ahead for us. Pollution levels, for example, were forecast to skyrocket to the point that they would end up killing off massive sections of the global population. But ultimately, it perhaps didn't worry people enough in the early 1970s. And when, in 2018, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation re-released news footage showing its original coverage of the story, the World 1 program again made headlines across the planet. This time because much of what it had predicted to happen appeared to be coming true. It suggested, for example, that the global population would rapidly grow from the 70s until at least 2020, which it has done. It also noted how the level of natural resources available to us would steadily decline in the same period, which rings true as well. It predicted that the somewhat hard-to-quantify metric of quality of life would also steadily fall, so that by 2020 it would match levels last seen in around 1920. The jury's out on that, but either way, the outlook from 2020 onwards wasn't good. The World 1 program foresaw that by the year 2040, pollution levels would dramatically rise beyond all other metrics. As a direct result, it predicted that the global population would dramatically fall from its 2020 peak, largely because of the pollution and a runaway human lifestyle. And finally, it said that quality of life would drop even further for those that still survived. At its bleakest, the World 1 program predicted the end of civilization by 2040, midway through the 21st century. In the 1973 ABC feature, the reporter had gone on to refer to the then unknown 2020s as a, quote, highly critical period, as a specific time when living conditions could very quickly plummet. And it could be argued that this general message does reflect the current state of the world, with issues around climate, population, and equality tending to dominate the big questions of today. Now, we're grappling with the realities of various climatological tipping points, so much so that we're increasingly starting to look at the wider solar system for potential planets to escape to, should we need to. As a society, we're increasingly influenced by the idea that an apocalypse could be just around the corner, which is ultimately what the World 1 program claimed to be the case. Elsewhere, the doomsday clock is probably the most prominent measure we have for how long we've potentially got left. Managed by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, it's regularly updated to reflect current threat levels. In the year 1991, it was at 17 minutes to midnight, the farthest from midnight it's ever been since it was created in 1947. Interestingly, at roughly this time, the early 90s, with the World 1 program, it was predicted that the population metric would surpass the quality of life metric for the first time, and also that the pollution metric would start its rapid, unsustainable rise. And since 1991, the doomsday clock has generally matched the predictions of World 1 in that its outlook has gotten gloomier and gloomier. Crucially, in 2020, the clock was moved the closest to midnight at 100 seconds to. So we can see that its projections do still tally with the World 1 program, and that today's era is deemed a vital time before a perceived oncoming imminent disaster. Among the reasons cited for the 2020 change to the clock, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists highlighted a failure by world governments to lessen the threat of nuclear war, as well as a continued failure to address climate change. The stark reality, then, is that for all the modern world's advantages, we're still never without the knowledge that a horde of weapons could one day end it all in minutes. And then there's the increasing risk that the general conditions of Earth could turn against us, too, with devastating consequences. So with all of this in mind, how far should we really be preparing for the end of days within the near future? As part of the original ABC feature on the World 1 prediction, expert analysts from the Club of Rome had suggested that international blocks could be one of the best ways forward. And to some degree, we have seen the international map evolve in this way, particularly with the United States, China, and the European Union. The same analysts also called for the world's biggest polluters to significantly reduce their output, though, and the results here haven't been as straightforward. Thankfully, in recent years, we have seen a greater emphasis on climate issues than perhaps ever before in international law, with the Paris Agreement tying most of it together, since the First Nations signed it in 2016. But in most cases, we're yet to see whether the various ecological targets set by countries all over the world will be met, and there have already been some high-profile withdrawals from the Paris Agreement, most notably the United States, which withdrew in 2020 but rejoined in 2021. According to data from the Union of Concerned Scientists, there is then still great reason to be, well, greatly concerned. The union estimates that 28% of CO2 emissions now come from China. The US is second with around 15%. At the time of the World 1 program, however, the United States had been highlighted as the greatest producer of pollutants in the world. So we can see how, just in this one instance, the landscape has changed in the years between 1973 and now. Interestingly, though, the US is still ranked within the top 5 countries for carbon emissions per capita, while China falls outside the top 10 for this particular measure. But in general, it really matters not which country is contributing what. From an international perspective, it's clear that global carbon emissions are continuing to rise year on year, and that's bad news for everyone. Nevertheless, it's not all doom and gloom. And again, the situation has changed considerably since the results of the World 1 program were first made public, with more and more modern services, companies, and initiatives aiming to push humanity into a cleaner and safer future. According to the International Energy Agency's Global Energy Review 2020, for example, almost 28% of the world's electricity generation now comes from renewable power sources. And while the growth rate for renewables has slightly dropped since 2018, the percentage share that renewables have in the total energy market has continued to increase. During the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, the IEA also claimed that renewable energy had emerged as the, quote, most resilient energy source against lockdown measures. Those who worked on the World 1 predictions in the 1970s called for global action to try to combat the alarming trends that their program had unearthed. So perhaps this recent increase in the uptake of renewables is an example of such action taking place. The big question now is, are we too late? And if not, can we continue making steps in the right direction? For now, few scientists or authorities would confidently claim that the world really will end in the year 2040. And in fairness, even the World 1 program didn't forecast total extinction for humankind, just the total breakdown of human civilization and a catastrophic drop in population. Still, it should be unnerving to all of us that so far, our recent history has so closely mirrored what an MIT computer predicted would happen in 1973, and therefore its predictions for the next 20 years can't be discarded. Instead, they serve as a dire warning for everyone on Earth. According to the study, there could be dark days ahead for us, but the hope for many in science and technology is that all is not lost, just yet. What do you think of the World 1 prediction? Will it continue to come true so that the world ends within 20 years? Or is the outlook brighter now than it was back then? We've certainly seen supposed dates for the end of the world come and go before now, but even if we do survive to see 2041, perhaps this is one foreboding forecast that we should be paying attention to.
There are some things about life on Earth that seem like they will never change, with the role of the moon being a fine example of something that we just never seem to question. When night falls, it's there. It's always been there. And presumably, it always will be. But actually, the moon hasn't always been a fixture of the sky above this planet. Not quite. And according to one model, its mere presence could one day soon cause us some very big problems. Humanity has a long history of being fascinated by the moon, but only in the last few decades have we begun to truly understand it. We know that moons in general aren't rare, with multiple other planets in just the solar system also having them, and some of the outer planets boasting considerably more of them than we do. We also have a leading theory as to how our moon came to be, the giant impact hypothesis, which says that sometime around 4.4 billion years ago, a now lost protoplanet smashed into an early version of the Earth, and the moon formed out of the debris. Regardless of how it arrived though, we know that the moon has been there, watching over Earth for literally billions of years. It's part of the furniture, cosmologically speaking, and yet, over time, its role and position have gradually and quietly changed. We know that, thanks to the effects of the gravitational bind between it and Earth, the moon's orbit has altered over time. Not by much, but it means that with every passing year, century, and millennia, the moon slowly inches further and further away from Earth itself. The moon's axial tilt has also shifted by about 6 degrees over billions of years too. And while these developments aren't exactly fast-paced and might never be described as dramatic, they do still show how the moon and the Earth are deeply linked to one another. They don't just exist side by side, and that has ramifications for Earth as well. Reports first emerged in mid-2021 that an upcoming wobble in the moon's orbit could cause major disruption and maybe even worldwide devastation in or around the year 2030. These reports weren't so much based on specific new data, but rather on a wealth of predictions made by a number of leading bodies, including, most notably, the world's foremost space agency, NASA. The idea that the moon's movements could one day wreak havoc on Earth has actually been around, known about, and relatively feared for a while now. It's just that today, in the 2020s, the time is fast approaching when the issues could begin to truly reveal themselves. We know that the moon is, of course, intrinsically linked with how the tides work on Earth, with its gravity essentially dictating when tides are high and when they're low. For the most part, it's a fairly predictable arrangement, and we humans have learned to live and work with it. But actually, as the moon and the Earth move through space, there are periods when the bind that exists between them is stronger or weaker. And when it's stronger, a period that peaks once every 18 years or so, the tides can be much more severe. And so, at that point, the predictable rhythm can become a little more concerning. In or around the year 2030 is then when scientists next expect a spike in tidal activity thanks to the moon, which is why so many headlines have earmarked 2030 as a potentially apocalyptic year. But is there really so much to worry about? Can we really go as far as to say that the moon could cause the end of the world within the next decade? Ultimately, the chances are still good that there will still be people on this planet to experience the delights of, say, the year 2030 or the year 2040. But the sensationalist, Armageddon-inducing warnings still have a valid point to focus on as well. As with so many future-thinking science stories these days, the problems that could be created as a result of the moon's movements through space in relation to Earth are made potentially so much worse thanks to clear and present problems with our environment. Surging tides without global warming can cause a lot of issues already, but with global warming, those issues could get truly out of hand. According to a July 2021 NASA release, while there's nothing new or dangerous about the regular and expected moon wobble itself, what is new and potentially dangerous is that next time it will combine with rising sea levels resulting from the planet's warming. Consider the fate of the Thwaites Doomsday Glacier. Thwaites Glacier is one of particular concern to climate scientists because of the threat that it could one day soon disintegrate. Rising water temperatures are causing it to melt from below, resulting in an increasingly vulnerable ice shelf. And if that ice shelf were to break, melt, and succumb to the sea, then it could contribute around 2 feet to global rising sea levels. That means it could directly impact thousands of flat and coastal towns and cities. And what's more, according to some predictions, the breakup of Thwaites could happen in as little as 3 to 5 years. And it isn't just Thwaites either, as there are other similarly significant, potentially devastating predicted glacier events tabled for the next few years as well. That's perhaps already worrying enough, but now add into the equation that the moon's imminent wobble is predicted to happen shortly after those potential glacier events. That could mean stronger tidal surges in the future, carrying much more water. Quickly, we begin to see how the problem could grow. And to make matters worse, literally billions of people currently live in at-risk areas. Such is the nature of human society to have historically built along the coast. But it's not a good combination. And in 2030, it could reach some sort of tipping point. And if not 2030, then perhaps 18 years later, in or around 2048. But is there anything we can do about it? The first thing might be to improve our sea defenses, and there are examples of this happening all over the world map, as various structures are built and waters are diverted in a bid to lessen the blow. In the long term, the movement of communities away from at-risk areas might need to be seriously considered too, although clearly this would represent a massive logistical headache, considering the major cities like New York, Shanghai, Mumbai, and so many others fall within the at-risk bracket. One thing's for sure, there's very little we can ever do to change how the moon behaves, nor how it directly affects what happens on Earth. Without suddenly developing the planet-moving capabilities of something like a Kardashev Type 3 civilization, we are, unfortunately, at the moon's mercy. But, of course, if we can't prevent the tides from happening, or prevent the wobbles or changes that they routinely go through, what we can at least try to do is keep the sea levels from rising too far. Most scientists agree that there's no one quick fix to preventing glacier melt, and that there's no easy answer as to how to slow down rising seas. But equally, small changes made by many people, we're told, have a major impact. And bringing down global temperatures to save or even restore the ice we're currently losing could gradually make a monumental difference. It can feel at times as though the future is a pretty bleak place, and predictions of catastrophe within the next 10 years aren't exactly going to help improve that pessimistic outlook. But the reality still may not turn out to be quite as bad as some currently fear, at least not this time around in the wobble cycle. The hope of the likes of NASA and others is that data regarding how the moon works should be listened to by every generation as we plot our way through the next decade, and then the one after that, and then the one after that. More often than not, there are things we can all do to improve our futures.
What would happen if space turned against us? What chance would we stand against the almighty power of the cosmos? When we think about world-ending events that could strike our planet from afar, it's usually asteroids that are at the top of the list of things to worry about. But really, there's another threat lurking on the horizon, and scientists fear that it could be about to unleash itself. In early 2021, news broke of the first ever confirmed space hurricane. This spectacular space weather event was actually recorded back in August 2014 as a swirling 600-mile-wide mass of electrons that had gathered hundreds of miles above the North Pole. At the time, and although it had reportedly raged for more than 8 hours, it passed by mostly unnoticed. As it was the height of summer, there wasn't even much by way of an aura in the Arctic sky to hint that the hurricane was taking place. The people of Earth went about their daily lives as usual. and besides some mild interference felt by a limited number of satellites, all was well. But these things come and go in cycles, and scientists believe that the next peak will come in the year 2025. So what should we expect? According to some, the effects next time could be much more severe. Really, a space hurricane is but one of a range of space weather events that do and will bombard our planet. And almost everything that happens in the upper atmosphere can be traced back to the sun. It may be a vitally important part of the solar system, but so much about the sun is still shrouded in mystery. In more recent decades, we've studied it in greater detail, and know now more than ever about how its energy fuels our planet. But for all the hope and goodness that the sun throws our way, its extreme power is also incredibly dangerous. And were it not for the Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere, our world would be far different and far less livable than it currently is. In September 2020, a group of scientists from NASA and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, released details to the public of what's known as Solar Cycle 25. It was deemed that by then we had passed through the solar minimum, the time when solar activity is at its lowest, which was in December of 2019. From that point, activity had gradually increased, so much so that scientists knew that we had entered into a new cycle. The Solar Cycle 25 prediction panel was set up to, unsurprisingly, predict what the sun would have in store for us. But most importantly, it gave us all a date for our diaries, July 2025, because that's when it's thought the solar maximum will arrive again, the point at which solar activity reaches its peak. So what do we mean by solar activity? It's primarily measured based on the number of sunspots that are visible on the sun's surface. Sunspots are temporarily darker regions seen on the sun that are often accompanied by or followed by various solar phenomena, including increased radiation, solar flares, and coronal mass ejections, or CMEs. More often than not, solar flares erupt from the sun and Earth is unaffected, as they lash out into another region of space and toward other planets instead. But sometimes a flare or CME shoots out of the sun in precisely our direction, and that's when there could be trouble ahead. The space hurricane mentioned at the top of this video took place around the last solar maximum, in solar cycle 24 in 2014, with it taking around 11 years to move through each solar cycle. History shows us that the effects on Earth were minimal, but we do know that the hurricane was powered by the sun. The electrons that rained down within it were brought here in plasma carried along by solar winds. 2 years earlier, though, in 2012, we famously had an even closer call when a coronal mass ejection shot out towards Earth, but thankfully missed a direct hit by a margin of about 9 days. Again, most of humankind was blissfully unaware of the cosmic near miss happening in the space above us. But that doesn't mean that there isn't cause for concern. Scientists are increasingly interested in space weather because the potential impact it could have on our daily lives is going up and up. That's because so much of our technology now relies on what's happening high in Earth's atmosphere, where all our satellites orbit. The electron rain of a space hurricane, for example, may never cause physical destruction on the ground in the same way as the rain and the winds of a traditional hurricane can, but equally, a traditional hurricane doesn't reach high enough to threaten widespread GPS or the internet. Storm surges can cause local blackouts, sure, but space weather has the potential to cause international blackouts, and not just in the expected ways either. The 2012 CME that just missed us was billed by many as a Carrington-class superstorm, referring to the Carrington event, a massive solar storm that struck Earth in September 1859. This event set the bar for the future of space weather, at the time causing widespread electrical disruptions. But of course, Earth was a very different place back then, and widespread electrical disruptions could never have quite the same impact as they would do today. Were a powerful enough Carrington-class event to happen tomorrow, then, the destruction it could cause could be immense. Say all or most of our satellites were frazzled. There'd be huge losses across the board in communication technology, leaving us without even basic phone signals. That's annoying if you were planning on phoning friends later that day, but it's critical if you're trying to run a business that relies in any way on digital connections, or if you are in sudden need of the emergency services. Most organizations have backup systems and generators, but the instantaneous links that we've all come to expect would be gone. In this scenario, you might be inclined to just sit back and watch TV and wait for this all to blow over. Except you couldn't do that, because TV wouldn't work without satellites. Most of the internet would be down too, and what was left of it would be extremely slow. Credit and debit cards wouldn't work, and neither would ATMs. You'd find yourself in the middle of a personal financial crisis, but it would be nothing compared to what's happening at the banks themselves or on the stock markets. The blackouts here equal economic disaster on a global scale. Finally, while all of this is unfolding, satellite navigation is down and GPS systems are out. Could you confidently find your way across country or even across your city without some form of maps app to guide you? Now you'd have no choice but to try. But the scariest part isn't unfolding on the ground. It's in the skies. With up to 20,000 planes in mid-flight at any given moment, and with all of those relying on GPS, when their maps go blank, it's an unparalleled disaster. Some flights might be able to safely land, but many others, unfortunately, wouldn't. Importantly, this is an absolute worst-case scenario. Nobody is currently predicting that this will happen in 2025, or in any other year. But the tension around space weather is growing because of our increasing reliance on satellite technology. What's clear is that we can't do anything to stop solar storms or coronal mass ejections. But at the same time, it feels almost impossible that we would slow down our technological growth. And that's why there have been various predictions that 2025 could be an especially problematic year. Between now and then, scientists definitely expect solar activity to increase to its next peak before dropping off again, as it has done for every solar cycle before now. The early predictions are also that there will be more activity in this cycle than there was in the previous one, solar cycle 24. However, most projections don't see a dramatic difference, and many early reports have solar cycle 25 as still being weaker than average, as still seeing less solar activity than most. But still, there's no doubt that by 2025, the world will be ever more reliant on satellite technology. So anything that even threatens it is a major concern. Will a genuinely deadly solar storm happen? It's possible. It's not guaranteed, but it is possible. Now it's up to Earth to prepare itself, just in case.
365 days. One journey of the Earth around the Sun. At whatever time, on whatever day you're watching this right now, you know that the same time and date will come to pass next year, and the year after that, and the one after that, and so on. But what if, actually, that wasn't the case? What would happen if humankind learned that this really was the end times for our planet? Picture the scene. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you become aware of sirens blaring out, of breaking news bulletins interrupting TV and the radio, of a sudden onrush of social media notifications, each more panicked than the last, of people rushing to the streets outside, a frenzy of screams and tears, and confused and frightened faces everywhere you turn. The truth has just been revealed. The apocalypse really is upon us. The world will end in 1 year's time. Exactly how such a scenario would ever come to pass is unknown. There are a few possibilities, though. In one, an unstoppable asteroid or rogue planet is spotted racing through the solar system towards us, with enough power to break our little world into tiny fragments. In another, an alien civilization first reveals itself to us and then, bizarrely, issues us a 1-year notice before they destroy everything we've ever known. In another, some kind of supremely bad human being gains control over the entire planet's nuclear arsenal and sets them all to explode in 52 weeks exactly, for no apparent reason other than the neatness of the plan. We could, then, be imagining some kind of genuinely possible natural and scientific setup or something more akin to a science fiction fantasy. But nevertheless, what would happen next? What would happen if the global population knew that its time on Earth really was running out. In a purely practical sense, the economy collapses, first of all. Far fewer people are going to turn up for work in a world that's as good as dead. And no one is going to be that interested in buying stuff, especially not for the long term, when the long term isn't even going to happen. If you knew there was only 1 year left until genuine Armageddon, would you bother making the Monday morning commute? Would you diligently continue to pay your rent on time? Not likely. Instead, we, the helpless human beings, would probably switch from doing the things we should do to doing the things we want to do. So, what does that look like? For many, the shock and fear over our impending doom would really rob them of the freedom to choose how they feel. All stages of grief would set in, and on a global scale. The collective panic would rise and rise as the few remaining weeks ticked by, which would turn some of us into angry and selfish versions of ourselves, while others might change in the opposite way, becoming more grateful and kind. It's often predicted that in the face of disaster, humans would turn to looting, violence, and chaos, and in some ways, predicted with good reason. Desperate times can lead people to acting out of character. But actually, there's evidence to suggest that humanity wouldn't turn ugly. In January 2018, a false alarm was issued across Hawaii, incorrectly warning residents to seek immediate shelter due to an incoming ballistic missile threat. In reality, there was no incoming weapon, and everyone was safe. But, and although the error was righted within just a few minutes, in the short time that people really did think their lives were at risk, there were no reported instances of unsavory behavior. In fact, there were only accounts of people trying to help one another. Based on that case study, it turns out that humanity isn't so bad after all. But of course, today's question is a whole other ballgame. Here, we're not talking about just a few minutes of terrifying uncertainty. We're imagining day after day along a certain road to death. How do you fill that time? Although the global economy will have quickly broken, whole industries could still pop up, seeking to make the best of the moments that are left. Try before you die goods and services, non-stop pleasure cruises, life after Earth contingency plans. Clearly, the opportunity for scams would be unprecedented, given that there'd be no time or particular desire for policing. But on the other hand, without money in the traditional sense, what could a scammer hope to gain? Perhaps we'd more likely see the emergence of close-knit communities built around like-minded people who all want the same or similar things out of their final days alive. There might be a group of storytellers traveling across North America, for example, or a band of divers congregated at the Great Barrier Reef, a troupe of musicians somewhere, spending their final year playing all their favorite pieces, or a setup of athletes organizing one final Olympic Games. Any and all would be surrounded by animals roaming free, released from farms and zoos, as nature returns to the wild as much as we revert to our instincts. Perhaps no one would feel the need to join together more, however, than the scientists, engineers, and technologists, because they, more than anyone, might believe that the end of the world can be stopped. For this reason, some versions of the internet might remain. Some forms of communication might still work. The needs to coordinate efforts would drive some to try to preserve the connections between us. Because, in whatever form the apocalypse were to take, knowing that it is exactly 1 year away would work like the ultimate deadline. A before and after moment beyond anything else. Could science and technology deliver a solution before that deadline came to pass? It's a sure bet that many would try. While some turns to nature and physics, however, others would turn to God. The world's religions will have encountered perhaps their most trying time in history. Those dedicated preachers who remain loyal to their cause would now be tasked with navigating their followers through the world's end. Armageddon wouldn't only be a looming threat on the horizon anymore, it would be there, happening, in front of everyone's eyes. Would faith in the rapture be enough to see them through? Would the image of heaven remain strong? Would tensions break out between those who believe and those who don't, or between those who believe one thing and those who believe another? This would be religion's ultimate test. More broadly, how does the picture change as we move into the final month? If it were an asteroid strike that was coming, then that fatal rock might now be visible in the sky. If it were some kind of alien attack, perhaps the ship is hovering over us. By now, Earth and human civilization could be a very different place. Ruin will have already started to set in, given all of the upheaval of the 11 months before. If there are people still frantically working to try and stop what's to come, then their numbers will likely have dwindled. Their scope will likely have narrowed, and whatever communication links might have remained between them will probably have failed. Likewise, all over the map, it could be as though the world were shutting down, eking out its final pangs of energy before the screen goes blank. Now is the time to tell people you love them, to rebuild bridges with friends you regret losing, and to, finally, cut yourself some slack too. Given the immense hardships that will have unfolded since our date with destiny was signed, the unfortunate reality is that the global population will have already dropped. By this point, food would be low, clean water would be scarce, energy and warmth would be difficult to come by. Homes and shelters would still stand, but as hollowed-out husks of what they once were. Other buildings, like offices, train stations, museums, and schools, would be abandoned, or else will have been fortified in one last desperate bid to kick against the inevitable. What do you think you'd be doing with 1 month left to go? How about 1 week? On the final day, there's really no telling what Earth would feel or look like. But what remains of humankind would be united under this single, monumental, and inescapable event. Families might gather together as one. Friends might spend their last moments having one final catch-up. Or the end of all things might actually be an entirely lonely place, with only your own thoughts for company. You will have made it to the final showdown, and so you look up to the sky and wait.
So what's your verdict? Do you think the doomsday predictions covered in this video will actually come to pass? Or are you still expecting humanity to live to fight another day? One thing we can say is that there are some serious challenges fast approaching for our species. From climate ruin, to the threat of war, a misbehaving moon cycle, to the potential for deadly space weather events, we need to at least be on our guard. The universe that we call home is a pretty amazing place, but the fragility of our planet in amongst all the rest of the cosmos is always abundantly clear. And that's why the world really could end in the next 20 years.
What do you think? Is there anything we missed? Let us know in the comments. Check out these other clips from Unveiled, and make sure you subscribe and ring the bell for our latest content.